And after them came the French. On the other side of what is called the Americas, the French came from the side which is called California. And the French, they came. And along with the Dutch and the French, they added another 28 million to the number that had already been destabilized, liquefied, and otherwise eliminated. We move on to the land called Africa. Those who had occupied the Americas knew that their own people, their own populations, could not do the work that was necessary to build up that country. They needed a new workforce. And so, along with the British and the Dutch and the French and the Spanish, the Americans concocted a deal. They said, let us build boats, and let us also make whiskey, and let us also make guns. So with guns and whiskey and boats, we can barter and trade, and we can go to Africa and take those dark-skinned black heathens, put them in boats, bring them to Europe, to America, in what was called the Triangle Trade. From Africa to the Americas, to Europe, back to Africa, this is a triangle. And so for 400 years, I said, not 100 years, not a century, not 2, not 3, but 400 years, they willfully trafficked in human cargo. And they took out of Africa 180 million people, like dogs and rats, putting them in the bottom of ships and keeping them there for the 3 or 4 months that it took for that triangle trade to complete itself, realizing that only 23 out of 100 of those slaves inside the ship would survive. So they made sure that the cost of those 23 slaves would pay for the whole shipment. Where did the other 77 slaves wind up? In the graveyard of the Atlantic Ocean. So you take 70% of 180 million. You are intelligent people. Take 70% of 180 million over 400 years, and they are in the bottom of the Atlantic. The other 30% of 180 million, the 52 million they brought and put between Europe, the Caribbean, and the Americas. So now you add 180 million to already 86 and 17 and 59. Somebody just keep adding. And let me give you the definition of what they did. The act of inflicting systematic attacks and assaults upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. And what does that mean? Terrorism. We don't want to even mention what they did inside the Congo, inside the continent. We don't want to have to mention what they did in South Africa. The Afrikaners, the Boers, who came from Germany into Africa, who systematically slaughtered and displaced and enslaved 39 million people in South Africa. Who were the natives? and held that position that they were a God-given population who had the right to dominate those heathens, and this was known as apartheid. And the world, the United Nations, accepted it all the way until how long ago? Just 8, 9, 10 years ago, apartheid was an acceptable form of government in the world, although it came out of what kind of action? The act of inflicting systematic attacks and assaults upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. What is that definition? And let's come to this good land of Australia. In case you Muslims who are immigrants, even if you immigrated 80 years ago, you're still an immigrant. Now I know you say, no, I'm Australian, I'm naturalized. But let me give you a little history, because I'm a history person. I'm a sociologist. And so I study these things to understand human behavior. I study them to understand the behavior, the development, the evolution of societies. And right outside your door, 50 miles in any given direction from Sydney, 50 miles in any given direction outside of Sydney, you can easily find, maybe not even 50 miles, you will find settlements of native people who are called Aboriginals. Very nice, complicated word, isn't it? Aboriginals. They are the people who own this land, have more right to this land than anyone else, according to the provisions of God. Not the provisions of the United Nations, not the provisions of those who came here, who displaced them systematically and replaced them systematically. Now today, I know the Aboriginals, they are a pitiful people. And we blame them now. We say, they drink grog all day. They shoot drugs all day. They are ignorant. They are dirty. They are lazy. They are shiftless. They don't want to change their condition. The opportunity is there for them like everybody else, but they don't want to change. And so, since they don't want to change, obviously they must deserve their condition. Who they have to blame? Nobody but themselves. We are taught that. Subhanallah. How can some people who have been systematically traumatized, their dignity ripped out of them, they are traumatized. They don't know who they are. They don't know where they are. Just for a moment, Muslims, take the time tonight or tomorrow, you and your children, if you dare and if you care, study what has happened to these people. Study what has happened to them, and you will cry. If you have any feeling inside of you as a Muslim, you will cry. You will hang your head down, and you will say to yourself, do I really deserve to be here in these people's place? Minimally, we Muslims here in this country, it should be our job to try and go to those Aboriginal people and offer Islam to them, because Islam may be the only thing that will bring them back from the trauma what has been done to them. And I believe that Allah is just and Islam is just, and Islam brought us here to introduce justice.